Obiter Dicta by Lucian M. Chapter 1. Curious onlookers drifted by, stopped, inspected, expressed facially their reaction, physically their emotion, stared, expressed views, moved on, turned back, or stood. Detective Matt Rekovich reminded himself of the countless times that he had walked through Granville Island, observing the same crowd, performing in exactly the same fashion on any given Sunday. Certainly, with all the crafts shops, curio stores, tarot card readers, and fish, meat, and produce market on the island, it was an obvious behavior. However, even with all this variety, a new product had appeared on the island today, a product not often displayed by the fish and meat mongers of Granville Market. It was fresh, like everything else in the market, which was certainly fact. It was a rare variety indeed. Matt looked down on the object of everyone's interest. Victim, John Victor Borman, age 44, height 5 foot 11 inches, weight 201 pounds, eyes gray, distinguishable marks, Black Panther head tattooed on left forearm, heritage, mix of North European and First Nations, occupation, 50% shareholder in a yacht outfitter's retail outlet on Granville Island, condition, head battered by a heavy metal object, possibly crowbar or similar. 4 stab wounds present. Wound delivered to heart, possibly fatal. Matt looked back at the crowd and sighed at the staring mass of faces. Faces blurred into one face. That tiresome face haunts every crime scene. He smiled grimly at this old friend. Matt glanced beyond this constant of his profession to the yachts moored in the marina. He studied the seagulls, scouting the decks of the ships for tasty treats left unattended. The pungent smell of the ocean mixed with the acrid smell of diesel oil, restaurant trash, tourist aftershave, and cologne. Matt raised an eyebrow on his hard chiseled features and ran his left hand's fingers through the back of his blonde hair, left slightly long in the back. He observed the sunlight as it bounced off the ocean water, following its stream to Granville Island Bridge. The bridge spanned the ocean in the role of an umbilical cord as it connected Granville Island to the West End. The wild West End, as its inhabitants call it. However, Granville Island had outdone Vancouver's famous West End on this particular day. Today's main event lay on the ground in front of Matt. John Victor Borman, the murder victim prepared for inspection. The time of death to Matt remained the usual mystery. The wedding band on the victim's ring finger asserted the killer's widowmaker status. He had been tyrannical in his supervision of the other officers and detectives as they arrived at the crime scene. The orders were clear. Do not step in the blood. Do not disturb the evidence. Matt reminded everyone constantly with a vicious stare. The police photographer walked over to him with a friendly smile. "Looking tired, Matt? Feeling okay?" Matt smiled and then looked at the crowd for a moment as he noted a young Oriental in the process of an intense study of the victim. Andrew Fu felt ill as he examined from a distance his employer's former client. He thought of Mrs. Borman, particularly how stunning a woman she was. Tall, blonde, a body that makes his excitement seek new heights. Sophisticated, pretty, vulnerable. All the elements that grace the front covers of fashion magazines. He remembered the hours of ecstasy he spent working with her on the company books and her personal financial affairs. He remembered how he had once rented some XXX movies and made his discovery. Sheila Love. His excitement started to increase as his mind's eye reeled clips from her movie, Love Keeps Coming. He just about completed himself as he saw her performing with 2 men while intimately entertaining a third. Sheila Love. A biological goddess, XXX queen, Mrs. John Victor Borman, wife of the victim. His client who, unbeknownst to her, was the object of his lust and affection. Andrew saw the detective look at him and casually brushed his suit jacket in an attempt to look indifferent. Joe Warman, disturbed by the young man brushing his jacket beside him, stepped back. He glanced over at his business partner, Bob Innes. "Seems pretty strange that John's been murdered so soon after what went down. The RCMP and Coast Guard boarded Scott's yacht less than a month ago and locked Scott up." Bob Innes nodded his head in agreement. Bob was a yacht broker and 50% shareholder in a Granville Island yacht brokerage firm with Joe. The arrest of his former brother-in-law and father of his 2 nieces was a family nightmare. He still was at a total loss how to explain the whole mess to them. What pisses me off is the headlines. The name Scott Morris ain't exactly the street cred it used to be. Before the headlines, he owned a yacht charter company on the island. It was a fixture in his daily life. This was the one and only headline, an accepted absolute. Now the headline is only about the inspection of his yacht and its result. Large quantities of South American cocaine and marijuana discovered, sighed Bob. I always knew Scott was very wealthy. He had indicated an involvement in the real estate trade. In addition, he noted success in the stock market and mutual funds to me, but this, reflected Joe. That's what upsets and terrifies me more than anything. How did he get so rich? Where did the money come from? Frowned Bob. What you're really saying is, you've heard the rumors too, about the possibility of Scott's link to the Gulf of Mexico cartel, asked Joe. Yeah, and even worse, the cartel said to be Mexico's most powerful and main conduit of drugs destined for the United States and Canada. What that means is that Scott's probably had his hands in money laundering. You have to wonder who else on the island or in Scott's family and friends might be part of all this, grimaced Bob. I guess the Mounties will primarily be trying to determine who Scott's suppliers were. Success should initiate Scott's interrogation to reveal his Canadian wholesalers. That would probably be only 1 or 2 groups at most. However, money laundering, that's different. That could be anybody. That could have been Borman, suggested Joe. John Victor Borman, a.k.a. the murder victim, who no longer was in a position to shed light on the subject. John, a money launderer? That's hard to believe. How many evenings after the close of business have we sat in barnacles, chewing the fat with John over his views of other cultures? His speculation on paranormal phenomena. John was a big husky guy who loved the grouse grind. He managed to refinance his father's yacht outfitter's business here on Granville Island. He was big on fighting against racial hatred and promoting social justice. That's how he got mixed up with a bunch of crazies that he started giving all his cash to, fumed Bob. And that's when his parents booted him out of the business. So what happens next? He winds up in LA and hooks up with a porn star. I mean, you gotta admit, it all sounds a bit suspicious. After all, how many guys marry a babe named Sheila Love, best known for her starring role in Love Keeps Coming? Smiled Joe luridly. How can you say that? You know how John told us the whole story of how she fell into it. They kept flashing more cash and she couldn't resist, snapped Bob. Couldn't resist, Joe retorted with a look of contempt.